So we're here today to talk through your country for this project. Why don't we start off by just telling a little bit about yourself, how long you've been playing D&D, kind of thing.
Sure. I'm Beck. I'm a hobby character designer, storyteller, digital photographer. I turned 29 this month. I've been playing D&D 5th edition specifically for about 6 years with just you, Robbie, pretty much, and nobody else. I've had a few other campaigns, but they haven't really gone anywhere.
Yeah, we have been playing D&D for about 6 years now.
For about 4 times a week, 3 or 4 times a week.
It's really crazy to think about in practice.
Yeah.
I have a terrible habit with Beck of
hmm
her always becoming my main character near the end of campaigns, just because she becomes so involved and makes so many strong decisions that the story kind of
Oh,
in Sandbox campaigns specifically fold herself around her.
you're flattering me.
No, I mean it's just true. So I think we're gonna have a very engaging campaign with four folks here who all share your habit of taking the main character role.
Yeah,
So I'm
I'm
really
very
excited
excited for that.
to see how that develops. uh, uh, is your favorite part about D&D generally? What makes you love it as a practice?
I'm a big role player. I love to write characters in general, but I love to get in the mindset of the character. The on the spot coming up with solutions to problems or responding to conversation is really what gets that dopamine flowing for me.
Hell yeah, that's what it's all about. What we're doing here is a very collaborative world where four players each design their own country of origin, including the history, some geography, key players, and we're taking those four countries and starting at a Peacemeet where the characters themselves, as well as the important players, all meet directly in the center of these four created countries, and then we're going to play a full Sandbox campaign rolling from there. So today we're going to learn about Beck's country, what the people are like, what the geography is like, and then what her player character is like within that. So Beck, does your country have a name?
It does. It does. And in my pure naming fashion, it's kind of just two pieces, two syllables that I like smushed together with an apostrophe in the middle. So
Love it.
my country is Midea.
I feel like Midea is a country that can be shouted with justice. Midea! Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It feels
Yeah.
like a
It has a
rallying call.
umph.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
really love that. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about Midea.
My country is more of like a peninsula shaped country. You've got three cities that are all lined up on the one side of the peninsula, and they're very isolated from the rest of the nations by this very dense forest. There's a lot of natural defense in this country. They're all built up on a very steep cliffside over an ocean, and they're socially isolated as well. So they kind of have a very solitary lifestyle, the people in this country. Idyllic, I would say, both societally and in terms of the geography, very flat up until the forest. Perfect for like farming, like meadowland, pastures, things like that.
What kind of crops?
All sorts of crops. They have like perfect climate for fruits, for root vegetables. There's a lot of fishing here as well, which I'll get to later. But also animal pasturing is a big thing for them. So like sheep and cows and horses.
I will say a lot of your neighbors and countries share the theme of difficult borders
Yeah,
in varying ways.
yeah.
Would you just tell me a little bit more about what makes the forest so dangerous?
Yes. So, and it's a bit complicated, so I'll get more into it later. But the reason the forest is so scary, so much of a border, is because the people in my country have been told that it's full of cannibals, and that nobody should be going in there because people who go in there never come back. The forest is a place where people who are punished are sent in exile, essentially. Fend for yourself or don't. They don't care. But those who go in don't come back.
Awesome. All right. So, Medea, tell me a little bit more about. Well, we'll get into the government structure in a little bit, but just I want to know from the poor citizen's perspective, what does their day look like from waking up to going to sleep?
The day-to-day life, this is very domestic, very predetermined, very monotonous. The people there are happy, and I think that they're happy because it is predictable and peaceful. I would say peaceful is probably the best way to describe it. There's no strife really in this land. And if there is strife, it's quickly dealt with. So, normal day to day, they don't have to worry about things like crime or violence or anything like that. So, mostly it's people wake up, they go and they do their job that they've always had to do or their job that was handed down to them. And then they meet their families, they go to bed, rinse, repeat.
So there obviously has to be in any society to keep crime low, and the poor citizen to be able to live kind of a stable lifestyle like that. There has to be kind of structures set in place. So
Mm-hmm.
tell me a little bit about the structures that exist in Midea that,
Mm-hmm.
that keep it functioning like this. Obviously, we have the isolationism set up where it kind of has a sort of monoculture, it kind of sounds like.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit more about that and kind of the establishment of that.
So this is a very faith-based culture, very, very religiously dominant. The person who has created the law of the land is the Hierophant, and the people who are enforcing the law is the Hierophatic order. Or the Templars. And basically, they have a very strict set of guidelines in which, if they even sniff out the slightest hint of dissent, then they send out the Templars to apprehend that person.
I like that you said it like a whisper
Hmm.
because I could barely hear it. The word was descent.
Yes.
I love that. What happens if they do catch someone descending? Is they catch someone being like, "What's beyond that forest? Could there be more
Mhm.
here?" What happens to them?
So before the sending them into the forest is like the ultimate punishment. That's we can't fix them, so we're just going to get rid of them. But before they put them through this trial called the trial of penitence, in which they have to imbibe this magical water that makes them forget everything, in which they are a clean slate. They are then given essentially a script of how they should be running their life and the person that they are. And then they're either sent back to exactly where they were before if they think it's not too much of a threat, or they're put in a different spot.
Amazing. Okay. So very controlled society for
Super.
sure.
Yes.
So from that angle, when we're talking descent, how many like in a percentage of the population, how many people are thinking that this structure is not right?
Hardly any at all.
Okay, so it's working. It's
It
definitely
is
working.
working. Yes. And it's
Descent
been
is rare.
working for a very long time.
Okay. Ooh, okay. So for the people on top, then, if you wouldn't mind, what is the most powerful person's day look like from beginning to end?
So technically, the most powerful person is the not the Hierophant, but the person that the Hierophant speaks to, minds over, which is the Oracle. And the Oracle is the person who receives the utopian vision of how the society is supposed to be run. And her day to day is almost equally as controlled as everyone else's. She has very strict expectations for how she's supposed to live her life. She's not allowed really to communicate with the other people in this country. She's not allowed to touch anyone or anything. She's covered head to foot. She's very quiet, generally speaking. And she isn't the one receiving any of the boons that she is helping to create in this country. It's actually the Hierophant.
That's tragic, but the thing is, it's working, right?
It is
Like
working.
it is creating this utopia where a small percentage of people are against it, and
Hmm.
most people are able to live their lives without suffering negative consequence. So
Hmm.
there's definitely a story there of great personal sacrifice, but like for her countrymen, who knows? So tell me a little bit, and maybe this is a play to find out. She's receiving these visions from something
Hmm.
for some reason.
Hmm.
Do we know?
Do we know who?
Yeah.
Yes. Um, we had briefly discussed how we wanted to set up our deities, like our
Yes.
structure.
Yeah, that's a great
I
point.
I had adopted one of those.
Perfect.
I adopted the Watcher as mine under the name Nem the Watcher. And the oracles are the daughters of Nem. And they are the only people who can see and speak to the Watcher Nem directly. Nem gifts them this vision, literally called the vision, of how the society should be run. And then they pass that on to the Hierophant, who then translates that into law as he sees fit.
So there's two layers of interpretation here. One from the oracle who's getting the direct message, and then from the Hierophant who sets the laws and structure. So we have those three cities kind of along the peninsula coastline. If you were somebody visiting your country for the first time, what city should they visit?
The
And
capital
why?
city.
The capital
Absolutely.
city. Tell me a little bit more about the capital of Midea.
So the capital of Midea is Telfanir.
Say that 2 more times for me.
Telfanir.
Telfanir?
Telfanir.
Telfanir.
Yes.
With a T.
With a T.
Telfanir. Got it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Here, there you go.
Telfanir. Perfect.
Yeah, Telfanir. It is a city that is made out of this beautiful white limestone with these azure rooftops, very Greek inspired. It has this great spiraling lighthouse that sits on the edge of the cliffside. Not like we would picture a lighthouse with, like a swiveling light or anything like that, but with braziers along the top.
So more like a beacon, like a standing beacon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like multiple eternal flames, and it's gilded. It's very pretty. It's spotless, but this is where, a lot of the actual production happens, like the actual creation of the goods from everything that's made in the countryside or that's pulled up from the sea. But it's also where a lot of the ritualistic stuff happens. Confederation is both the capital and the seat of power for the religious structure, including the Hierophant.
Yeah, so that's obviously an important city. We're 100% going there, so I'm very excited to explore that. What are the other cities like?
So there's two other cities. One of them is Kenneth Lyre. This is a cliffside village as well. They're all cliffside villages because this is their only outreach to other countries, is if they sit on the edge and can move resources in and out from there. But the people who live here are probably living in the most dangerous conditions of the rest of the country. Dilapidated cliffside, rocky edges falling apart. They have to get resources from thousands of feet below where the city actually is, tied to tethers, like rope lines, going down to the bottom where they pull up baskets of fish, or they might be mining off the cliffside using picks or something like that and being hauled back up. And then even when they're up top, it's difficult to get to and from the city, and they have to pass over these rickety bridges between chasms where the rock has already fallen away.
What are the species makeup? Are these diverse populations? What are we looking at in terms of, if you're visiting, the populace?
In terms of like the whole country, because it's been so isolated for so long, it's mostly homogenous. It's about 80% high elf alone. Yeah, it's about 80% high elf, 10% wood elf, 5% halfling, 3% human, 2% other.
I love the halfling. Get ready to meet a lot of high elves, everybody. Get ready to meet a lot of snobby high elves. Snobby? Are high elves snobby? What are high elves? Pretentious? Who knows?
They're
But
very
we'll
capable.
subvert the narrative. Who knows? Maybe these high elves are like super modest. They're not.
Could be. You don't know.
Out together. Awesome. All right. Okay. So I would love to be a halfling here. That sounds so funny.
They are treated as equal. Everyone is treated as an equal here, but there is very predominantly a high elf population here.
When's the last time someone got sent to the forest to be eaten by cannibals?
Recently, actually.
Ooh, tell me about
recently.
that.
So actually, the last person to be sent into the forest was the previous oracle, like probably directly before we will be starting the campaign.
Man, did the oracle just like have enough of not being able to participate in the society that they were working so hard to build?
No, she actually committed a crime herself. And
What was the crime?
she started telling secrets to someone that she shouldn't be.
And who was she telling these secrets to?
Actually, my character.
Well, why don't you tell me a little bit about your character and how they fit into the world and country of Midea?
Well, if you insist. So I'm going to be playing the Inquisitor Generalis, Sherrilyn Astalder. She is the head of the Hierophatic Templar Order, so she reports directly to the Hierophant. She spends most of her time guarding the Oracle. She also directs the rest of the Templars on how to apprehend the criminals and how the punishment should be served to them. But all of that time with the Oracle led to a very special connection between the two of them that should not have existed.
Wow. Were you there when the Oracle was escorted into the woods to be eaten by cannibals? Were you part of that?
She was part of that. She didn't want to be part of that, but she had to be part of that. She didn't see another way. But they had a moment before she was sent into the forest. She had a little peck on the cheek from the Oracle before she was sacrificed to the woods.
And that stays with you. So what secrets did she share? What forbidden knowledge was such that she had to be cast out?
He told the Inquisitor that everything that they have been told has been a lie, and that the Hierophant isn't what he seems.
So after this tragic series of events, has the new Oracle been appointed?
Yes, actually, it's almost like there was no pause in the duties of the Oracle. The moment that she was sacrificed, a new Oracle came to take her place. But this is the last one that exists. So they can't just send this one away. They have to make sure that this one behaves appropriately.
Are you still responsible for the new Oracle's care?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Hierophant didn't know that the Inquisitor was involved.
Amazing. So just thinking through the Peacemeet that you're about to find yourself at, a gathering every 50 years, which I'm sure there's a word for, and all countries gather. No one even remembers who started this practice, or why it is done. But some of the most important trade agreements in all of history, some of the most important peace agreements in all of history happened at this 50-year moot. So large retinues are sent, including those hoping to gain power, those looking to hobnob. For your country, I don't know how much of that exists because there's such a set power structure.
Mm-hmm.
But it would kind of at least demand strong representation, especially because although there's that forest that blocks your way, a lot of the other countries surrounding you do not have readily available farmland. So you do have existing natural resources that are valuable. So who in this structure goes to the Peacemeet?
That's a great question. I actually think that they might be willing to send some of these people that are very high up in power. I think they would be willing to send the Hierophant or even the Oracle there, just as kind of like peacocking, like to say, look how powerful and how wealthy we are. We don't really need to be here, but we're going to make a point, you know?
Even if just to be like, don't fucking try anything.
Yeah.
Right? Like, even if, yeah, I love that. I think it makes sense for the Oracle to be there just because you yourself are going to be there and you're charged with protecting the Oracle, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think it makes sense for them to both be there. I think it makes sense for kind of a larger guard force to be there if the goal is peacocking, especially, maybe a lot of
Absolutely.
the Templars.
And the oracles can't be touched. So, like in any way, they say if the oracle is touched, that she loses her ability to see the vision. So nobody's allowed to touch her. So I guarantee there is a large military force that it would be between the oracle and anyone from any other country at any time.
And so that kiss on the cheek,
Mm-hmm.
that really meant a lot
It did.
because to the Oracle, for as much as she knows, that would lose her ability to receive the truth.
Yes. Not only that, but what she, the Oracle herself, did not know is that in touching the Inquisitor, now the Inquisitor can see the vision, and the Inquisitor can see the Watcher.
Is that like the forming of your oath as a paladin?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So
Previous to that, her oath was to the Hierophant and to the order surrounding the Oracle. In a way, her faith is still with the Oracle. She maintains faith that the Oracle is okay. I think she has to when you love somebody like that. A person who you were never allowed to touch or never allowed to really form an intimate connection with. I think you have to maintain that faith. But upon returning to Telfanir, sun sets, everyone goes into their homes. She's on night watch, and she realizes that there's this monstrous, shadowy creature hanging over the city that she has never seen before, and nobody else seems to see, who speaks to her. And that's when she realizes what that kiss really meant.
that is the Watcher
Yes.
in physical form.
Mm-hmm.
What a gift you've given me as a starting point for storylines in a Sandbox campaign. There's just so much going on there in a beautiful way that is going to be very, very fun and powerful to interact with. That's awesome. Let's say the Inquisitor is showing somebody around the country, an important dignitary or something like that. What are there any other places that you would make sure they get to see, to experience Midea as the Inquisitor truly sees it?
Well, I would say quintessential to being part of that country and part of their day to day. She would want to show a visitor the migration of the butterfly fish every night. So, no one in this country, except for the people, the Oracle, and the people touched by the Oracle, can see the Watcher. But the people in the country know that the Watcher exists because every day at dusk, there's a migration of these beautiful fish where they swim towards the city into the glittering caves underneath of it. And these fish, they look like koi fish, but more colorful with these long whiskers and these gossamer wings that look like an actual butterfly leaping in and out of the water. And it's a spectacle that people of the city are required to see. Every single day, they go out to the edge, to the railing, and they look down upon the fish as they swim into the caves. And nobody can access these caves except for the Hierophant, but they're gemstone filled caves, like precious stones. But you can see the fish, and she would want them to see that.
For the populace, why does this so conclusively prove the Watcher's existence?
The people of the city have nothing really except the word of the Hierophant. And because things are so orderly, they have a tendency to just believe everything that he says. And the way that he has maintained this faith from his people is by saying, look at this thing that is happening. Clearly, this is proof that the Watcher exists. And the people being happy and, living peaceful lives are inclined to believe him. Well, obviously, if the fish are migrating towards the city, that must mean that our city is watched over. And if we are safe, then clearly it's the Watcher that is keeping us safe because that's what the Hierophant says.
I cannot wait to hear us go through those places and those experiences. Is there any misrepresentations of Midea from an outsider perspective? I know from the Inquisitor viewpoint, it's kind of hard to know that, right? Because you're part of this isolationist society. But kind of from your mind as the creator of this country, are there any misperceptions that you think would be commonplace in the surrounding lands?
Yeah, I think that people from other countries probably overestimate the power that the people in my day have. Because of the resources available to them, they're actually not a very strong military society. They don't have iron, they don't make steel. Do they have a military? Yes, but it's not very expansive, it's just efficient. Natural defense of this country really is what protects them. And I would also say the projection that they cast at themselves to other countries. I think saying that they are stuck up is probably accurate, not intentionally, at least not for the normal day to day civilians. I don't think that they're very stuck up. I think they're just confident in the way that they have been living. I would also say maybe they think they're a little more magically inclined than they actually are, when really the only people who are very strong with magic are the people close to the Hierophant.
Yeah, a structure where the power is dependent on how close you are in proximity to the person in power
Mm-hmm.
is very interesting to explore. And I love that your character is starting as someone very close to
Mm-hmm.
that power structure. So a question about that. What is the Inquisitor and Hierophant's relationship like? Like, how do you talk to the Hierophant? How regularly do you talk to the Hierophant?
I think prior to the sacrifice incident, I think that they had a much more confident relationship in that unquestioning of his authority. Much like the rest of the people in the city, if he says this is the case, then that's what I'll do because clearly the results speak for themselves. But I think after being touched by the Oracle, after speaking with Nem and hearing, the Hierophant isn't what he seems, she still has to deal with him. It is still her job to work for him and work under him, but she's beginning to have these glimmers of rebellion. Is it, it's like a moral quandary. Is it better to tell people that they have been lied to so they have the option to live their life for themselves? Or is it better to just allow them to keep living under the Hierophant's rule if that means that they live a good life? And I think that that's probably her quandary at this moment.
Another question building on that. Does the Inquisitor now have the ability through touch to reveal the Watcher?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I think only the people of the Oracle's line have the ability to spread that. Nem is kind of a mysterious entity. She's bound to the city because of the Oracle, but she's also bound to the city because there is an artifact that the Hierophant keeps that prevents her from leaving. So I have thought maybe in the harnessing of Nem's power that could be shared, or that some people have had that shared with them under the Hierophant's eyes. But I hadn't thought if Sherrilyn could share that with other people. Yeah, Nem actually isn't the spirit of the water. She's actually a spirit of the land that is forced to be in this position and to channel their power into the water at the will of the Hierophant. She cares about the forest, not the rest of the country, the people who live in the forest and the land of the forest. And she wants to return the country to that state.
Going to the Peacemeet, obviously you're going to have to pass through the forest, right? Because that is the natural border if we're going to the center.
Or you go around.
Or you go around. So what does going around look like?
So that's actually how they do trade with other countries, is they have a couple of different options. So the third city that I hadn't mentioned is Ishtowen. And their way of trading is by unmanned crafts, because obviously they're not allowed to have contact with other countries. So they either have skiffs, like boats, like small boats that they send, or they have balloons or kites that they send if they were going to this meeting and they didn't want to pass through the forest, which they wouldn't want to because they've told everyone in this country, don't go into the forest, you'll never come back. They would probably take the harder way to get there just to maintain that belief. So I think maybe they would, in a very risky way, you know, get into a ship that gets lowered all the way down into the water, go all the way around the continent, find a way to get back up. They might have to get pulled back up or climb up somewhere or something like that. Lift the oracle on a palanquin to get where they're going.
Amazing. I think I know the answer to this, but let's say members of other countries sent like a scouting party into the forest. None of them have ever returned, right?
As far as the people in the province know, no. But there is a very good possibility that they are in there.
But from like an outsider's perspective, right? Like, let's say they were trying to send folks in.
Hmm.
Do you think that your perspective wouldn't have the answer to this, but just out, from your perspective, do you think that other countries would be able to gain knowledge about the forest via expeditions over
Yes,
time?
I do. Yes. The people in the forest who are still in there, um, are very much, they don't have good feelings towards the country that cast them in there. But moreover, they start to realize as they are in there, because Nem is the spirit of the earth and they are touching the earth that Nem was a part of, what the fact of the matter was, and that has gifted them with special characteristics and special knowledge. And so, if outsiders came in to say, what's going on, I think they'd be happy to share information with them and say, hey, by the way, this is what's actually happening on the other side of the border, because they want to return the land to the way that Nem sees it.
So, what are Medea's imports and exports?
I have a very specific list of all the exports, and the imports list is very small, but it's very important because they don't have any of those resources there. They would have to bring them in
Yes.
order to maintain any sort of military, to have any tools to do the rest of the jobs. And the lumber, firewood, coal specifically, just because they won't go near the forest and there's no other trees there. Or if there are trees, there's not nearly enough trees for them to chop down and use for those resources.
I love the idea of the country like filling a boat full of lumber
Hmm.
and then floating it down their river into your country. Like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
like through the mountain range and then getting a balloon back that's just
Mhm.
like gold or that's like salt or other exports. I love that.
Geographically, the only other thing that countries trying to get through or get into the forest would have to worry about is there is a volcano in the forest. It hasn't gone off in a very long time, but there is one there, and it does naturally heat the forest enough to have a different flora than the rest of the country.
And I would bet almost maybe visible from the Peacemeet if it's taller than the forest, right? Because the Peacemeet is taking place in this kind of an ancient structure.
Hmm.
No one even remembers which country built it,
Hmm.
in this dead center of all four countries.
Hmm.
So if the forest is kind of right on the edge and the volcano is tall, there's a chance that, in between the volcano is the Peacemeet kind of forecast in the background.
And that would definitely influence who they send to the peace meet, because the rest of the people in the country don't know about the volcano.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be a long journey, right? They're probably going to see
Hmm.
a lot of truths that aren't
Yeah.
just your exposure to other cultures. Like the second they get there and see tabaxi with advanced artificery, that
Hmm.
kind of blows some stuff up. Or so, I'm yeah, that's gonna be some culture shock for sure. And I'm really interested in the new oracle's perspective and the Hierophant's control over the new oracle's learnings, given that he just lost one to free thought.
It would definitely be much stronger in multiple ways, because he's so worried that he doesn't want the same thing happening again. And because she's like the last one, if something screws up, then he might lose the control that he has. But also because the new Oracle is very, very young. She is an actual child.
Makes sense, right? Like she was to be prepared to replace, so
Yeah,
like it makes sense that she's there early.
yeah.
I love the idea of her like being secretly blindfolded and like have earmuffs on underneath her white. She like he won't take any risks with this one. She's not
Yeah.
learning shit at this piece meet. She's
Don't
just
look at
there.
her. Don't
Yeah,
breathe in her direction. Yeah.
that's amazing.
Mhm.
But this is so good. I love this country. It's given me so much to work with. I'm like already
Me
want to make
too.
the Hierophant my big bad, but I can't do that because I had it would just be immediately doing what I said
Yeah.
with you, making you
Yeah.
immediately the main
Yeah.
character.
Yeah, listen, give everyone else a chance.
Yeah, a
I
hundred
mean, he
percent.
probably he is a bad,
Well, no, we'll deal with them.
but
It's
later.
a sandbox. There's problems in all four of these countries that I'm hoping that this party will gain together and try to resolve through shared conflict and shared opinion and belief. Um, so that's very exciting.
I'm just really excited to get into this. The character I'm playing has kind of been my love child for, 15 years. I originally wrote this character when I was still in high school, and I'm almost 30 now. She has grown and developed with me, and I'm excited to play a very haughty, imperious paladin type character.
Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being with us, and thank you so much, Beck, for being absolutely a joy to play with for 6 years now, every single
Thank
week,
you.
multiple times a week.
Thank you for
Um,
having me.
cannot wait to go on this journey with you. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
A journal entry from Ser Sherrilyn Astalder on the way to the Peacemeet.
Hierophant's procession departed Midea over 2 weeks prior. He made a big show of it, since this was the civilian's first time getting to see our new oracle. I don't know her as well as I should, I'll admit. Oracle Sabina is so young. I doubt she has any idea as to where she's about to be paraded or why. The people probably can't tell through the shroud of her garbs and her palanquin, but I and the other members of the order traveling alongside her know that she is completely blindfolded. She will stay like that until we reach our destination. What is it like to be so utterly deprived of all things sensational? I wonder. The people laid flowers and scattered seeds across the street on our exit, chiffon ropes holding them away from our procession. Useless things, meaningless decoration. It only took a couple of days to reach Kenneth Lyre, and from there it took several more to hitch the palanquin onto rope lines and carefully lower it below into the waiting ship. This will be the first crewed by the people of our country since the last Peacemeet 50 years ago. The longest leg of our journey was taking the ship en route around the peninsula to pass the woodland, the only route which would truly keep hidden the secrets of our famously lethal and clandestine border to our neighbors. The Hierophant has been watching me carefully, indeed watching all of us carefully, scrutinizing every member of our order, every one of my men, believing he is so magnanimous in his criticisms. His loquacious manner belies his ambition to keep Midea the picturesque country of platitude. Well, we shall see about that. While I might not be able to trust my own thoughts to my comrades, at least I have Harkin, my noble steed. He shall never betray my confidence, surely. Could you say for me red leather, yellow leather?
Red leather, yellow leather.
Okay, and then explosive plosives.
Explosive plosives.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. We return again to the intro session of The Lands That Make Us, a collaborative sandbox campaign where I, as a DM, and the players work together to create 4 unique countries that we will utilize as the setting for the sandbox portion of the campaign. Today, I have one of my absolute favorite players joining me. Will you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Parker, husband to Becca. I've been enjoying every single campaign that I've been a part of yours, so happy to be a part of this one.
Thank you. That means a ton. Thank you so much. Give me one second. I have a sticky note here that says "Stop saying aw so much," and every time I say aw, I look at the sticky note and feel deep shame within myself. I'm sorry, audience, for any time now that I've made you aware of it that I say aw. But yeah, you have created a country as along with your fellow players, and today we're just going to meet and kind of talk about the country you've created. But first and foremost, is how long have you been playing Dungeons and Dragons?
I think this year will be the 3rd year I've been playing. I've been a part of 4 campaigns as of now, and it's been a blast just getting into it because I was hesitant at first, but I've always wanted to try it, and now it's something that I just look forward to every single time we play.
What is your favorite part of playing Dungeons and Dragons?
Definitely what we're doing right now is kind of like the world building, kind of how everyone has a piece of the pie. It's no one thing is ever the same. It's a bunch of ways you can go about it, and that kind of fluidity and creativity is what really I enjoy about D&D.
Yeah, it's something that D&D as a medium has access to that few other things do, right? Like video games remain kind of constant. BG3 is kind of the closest, obviously, because it's based on D&D, where there's so many variables you can go through, but you still hit a wall with variables. While D&D, it exists as its living, breathing thing within our kind of shared collaborative imagination. That's probably my favorite thing about it too.
Yep.
So with that, you have created a country. What is your country's name?
So the actual nation itself is known as the Confederation of Kingdoms, but the land itself is called Hỗn hợp, or mixed, and it's kind of attributed to the landscape of the actual nation. There are three distinct areas of kind of, I guess, the continent or like the region itself. There's kind of this coastal area of beaches, a few tree lines. Not really developed. There is the one major city of Kuana. It's kind of like the major port city and major trade hub of the Confederation. And then
So the Confederation of Kingdoms, also known as Hỗn hợp.
Hỗn hợp.
Love it. What is that the capital?
No, so the capital is going to be in like kind of the border region between the coastal area and the jungle, and it's called Kai-Hok, and it was the kind of the focal point of the Unification War, where you had the two factions, mainly the one of the jungle, headed by the Min family, and the various trade guilds and mercenaries of the coastal city. That's where like that final battle was, and where the Min family was able to basically wipe the army of the Kuna off the field and unify the region under them. So they kind of made that city their capital as kind of like a symbolic as well as like a practical reason.
Love that. And the name of that city one more time?
Kai-Hok.
Awesome. From a bird's eye view looking down at your country, what in general terms would the bird see as it flew over?
Really kind of you would see this going from the coastline in like this beautiful tropical / temperate tree line with various fishing villages, and then obviously the big city along it. Going inland, starts getting more lush with vegetation, jungles, deep underbrush, kind of like you won't be able to pierce the canopy of the actual jungle itself to look down. Then as you go further inland, the jungles start dissipating, and you start getting these like really just rolling hills that lead into kind of further into the continent.
I love that. And then tell me more about the capital city and where it is located within this kind of general geography.
It really is kind of like the crossroads between the jungle and the coastal region. It's in this little clearing, both kind of out of necessity, but also scars of the Unification War. And the city itself was founded before the battle. After the battle, obviously, destruction happened. The city itself kind of was mauled, and the royal family kind of took it upon themselves to rebuild it as kind of like the image of the new Confederation. There's no real culture that takes precedence in that area, but at the same time, the royal family will like remind the people, like, hey, we are still the ruling party, so to speak.
Tell me more about the Unification War. What it ended with this kind of steady allegiance and unity of this rebuilt city forming as a symbol. What were some of the motivations behind the parties, and who were the major players involved?
So, kind of like what I mentioned earlier, the Min family was kind of is one of the stronger families that's based in the jungle itself. And the jungle itself is kind of like this weird hodgepodge of like isolated chiefdoms and lords and ladies of the land. So there never really was a focal power until then. But because of their isolation, the coastal regions, what they would often do is start like slowly pushing into the jungle. They want more, they have the money, they have the capability of trading, so they can push further in and kind of start eroding the area. And so the Min family was kind of like the rallying of the jungle, so to speak, to kind of push against that, which is what was the catalyst of the Unification War.
So having an opposing party that was born within the same country and having this kind of internal conflict, there's going to be some fallout within the residents. Is there still this kind of prevailing tension that exists between former parties, or since the unification and since kind of this mixing of cultures in the capital and under the Min family lead, has it kind of evolved to a point where everyone sees the Civil War as kind of a mistake, or are there still those out there who are like, no, we deserve that land?
So it definitely is still bad blood between both of the parties, and it is kind of played out in the government itself. The two main factions, you have the Bien War, which is the coastal region, and they are the ones who promote more like outside engagement with other countries. They're the ones doing all the trading, all the like outside connections, that kind of stuff, and kind of building their legitimacy beyond the borders. And then you have the main royal faction, the Tinduang. They are the ones who are kind of like, no, that war was bloody for a reason. It was because of our differences that we had that war. We need to move beyond it and kind of like say, no, we are one entity rather than multiple entities under one roof. But at the same time, they still want to maintain the authority and power that they won in that war. You can really make the argument that the war never ended. It just moved from the battlefield to the chambers government.
So Kaihok, the capital of Hỗn Right, so let's dig into kind of life within the capital just a little bit further. I want to get into the perspective of kind of the most disadvantaged in this country for just a moment. Thinking from that perspective, what is a day in the life of a citizen here, like in the capital city, of like the poorest of the poor?
It's a lot of scrounging around to see what is there to do. You have merchants and traders from Konoha coming in from the coastline to sell their goods and to kind of use that as like the jumping off point to go into further into the continent. And so you have a bunch of goods, a bunch of material, artisans and whatnot flowing in, but they still maintain most of the wealth. So it's kind of like pinching pennies in terms of actual employment in it. It's kind of more like, which merchants can I work for? Who needs help? Who needs moving stuff? Who needs manual labor that they're not willing to do? It's not a really specialized city in that regard. There's not like a centralized industry that the capital can claim. It's more so a gathering of all the various artisans and trades that focus on that one, but nothing's actually made there. There's not a whole lot of like native workshops there, except from like the onesie twosie local things. And so a lot of the labor is just manual blue collar stuff. The capital is less so the industrial and economic center as it is the cultural center. Kind of by nature of being in the center, a lot of different people are coming in from different directions and they bring with them all the different ways of life within the country itself. And so like a person will probably see a bunch of people performing in market squares, people haggling, bartering with each other. Definitely going to be a few underground rings there just because it's very hard to keep track of anything with so many people coming in and out. And so kind of your day-to-day person is going to be either finding out what am I going to do for today and will I actually get through today without having to go into trouble.
What does trouble look like?
Black market deals, smuggling. A lot of merchants from the coastal city don't want to pay taxes, and so there's definitely going to be like smuggling network there, and a lot of times they will masquerade as either foreign entities or religious kind of charters who have this sense of immunity because no one wants to really be on that bad side of the church or like the church as a whole.
Yeah, that leads me into my next question. What role does religion and the church play in Hỗn hợp?
I would say it is important but not impactful. You have the royal family who like will claim that theirs is divine right to rule, mandate of heaven, all that wonderful jazz. But in terms of it playing a role in major government, it's very limited as like an actual physical entity. That being said, the nature of having a lot of different cultures means there's a lot of different religions. People are very like accepting the fact that there's many ways you can view the world, many ways you can worship. Even before the unification, people have just grown accustomed to seeing like 5 different religions all in a row and like don't think twice about it.
I love that. And I should ask, how long ago was the Unification War?
From the time that we're going to be starting this campaign, I would say it's been about 3 or 4 generations. So it's still relatively new, but at the same time, the nation itself has been established for quite some time.
And then just to stay on the capital for just a little bit longer, what would the day of the most advantaged, the most wealthy member of society be like?
Just kind of throwing an example of a merchantman just comes in and is set up shop there. Chances are, after like working in the market, selling off goods, either to fellow merchants, travelers, or kind of abusing the low income of the area of like either hiring people or selling people something that they think they need for a ridiculous markup. There's a bunch of banquet halls there. Again, like it's a very lavish and cultural city. And so there's theaters, there's plays, bands, taverns, everything just all coming together in this one area. And so there's no want of like what to do in an evening.
What are the buildings made of? Like, what do the physical structures look like as you walk around?
It's a weird blend of brick and mortar, but also just hardwood. And again, it's kind of that mixing, or you can kind of see it as like the conflict between the jungle and the coast, because on one side of the city you might have brick and mortar, actual like constructed buildings, and then you might have these like lavish wooden frame structures that are less practical but more eye candy kind of deal. You can see between districts which guilds and which factions stay where. You can see like that vast difference in architectural style.
You said that there is the Min family still descendants of royalty, a couple generations now since the Unification War ended. So is the system of government that is currently prevailing monarchy? Is the royal family also in political power, or what is the ruling structure?
Come to the capital and appeal and petition towards the monarchy to like have certain things on a nationwide scale be enacted. But in terms of local governance, like local taxes, policies, that kind of stuff, so long as it didn't threaten or go against whatever they decree as law, you could do on your own with very little pushback from the actual Min family.
Who sets the law? Was it decrees from the Min family to begin with, post unification, or did they maintain?
So each kingdom still had their own set of laws, but then the Min family just introduced kind of overarching laws for the land. Say in Koh there may be a law about the punishment for stealing or for bribery, that kind of stuff. But if you did it to like a royal worker or someone of higher authority, then the Min law would take effect, and then you would probably face either a higher punishment or something. So kind of the way you can think about it is local laws, and then there's the kingdom laws.
I love I bet someone out there has, in this period of these 3 generations, tried to pass some sort of state laws that contradict a Min ruling.
There's like, especially early on, there's still that pushback between like what can stay from the old ways and what has to go. There's still a little bit of like rough around the edges of like how much say does the royal family have in local affairs, and how much can a local government impact the nation as a whole.
Will you tell me a little bit about some of the other cities in Hỗn hợp?
Yes, in terms of cities, there's not a whole lot of metropolises outside of the port city and the capital. You'll have these little states or fiefdoms scattered around both areas that have like some regency, some authority, but in terms of like population, it's more or less localized to that population. Kurnoa and Kaihawk are kind of the two big ones that people would know. Otherwise, you'll get like these little villages and towns scattered about.
What is life like in the jungle?
Very isolated. It's kind of the irony of the situation of the jungle being the unification. Two closest villages next to each other might have like vastly different beliefs and like cultures just because of the dense vegetation and limitations of travel between the two. For the most part, the jungle is very much untouched. They take pride in the fact that they are their own little communities and are self-sustaining in several ways. They don't really interact with anyone unless they need to. And so it's each tribe, each like little kingdom will be on their own unless something would come up between them, in which case they would often then go to Kaihawk to appeal to the Min family to kind of mediate it without having to solve it locally.
What do you imagine as some of the main imports and exports?
Agriculture is big for Hỗn hợp, mainly in the jungle and the hills beyond. Lots of grains. The rolling hills and have like great pasture land, so agriculture and animal husbandry are big. Then you have the port city, which is a unique position of being able to trade with outside entities because there's not a lot of high elevation and not a lot of natural resources in the area, but they can import it. And so you have like these little workshops that then produce tools, jewelry, and kind of more material than the rest of the nation, which is why the city is very much the seat of economic and industrial power. And from there, that's where they get a lot of their more exotic exports from. But they still have to import a lot of the just raw materials.
As a country, bordering these three other countries that have pretty different cultural standards overall, are trade routes something you see as being established, currently established, have established, or just in terms of interacting with other countries? What do you see as your country's position? Is it isolationist? Is it open policy?
So that's another point of contention between the jungle and the city because Kurnoa, they want to trade. That is the source of the power. That's the source of the income and economy. They need outside connection in order to actually maintain their position as the center of the economy. The jungle and to an extent Kaihawk are not exactly necessary for trade. They've had a long history of self-sustainment. They have everything they need. They never needed like more the materialistic goods, and so they are less inclined to reach out to enact those kind of like trade deals and whatnot. But because of the status of the Confederation being one entity, they've kind of been lumped into a very small trade deal with outside countries to get those imports for the city, because otherwise that city would have nothing other than fishing.
I think there is a country nearby that has a desperate need for lumber and would be willing to trade. And I feel like given the circumstances, lumber would be something you'd have access to. But I know keeping the jungle kind of unharmed is also culturally really important.
And
So deciding to trade lumber might be like that's probably something that if you did do would take discussion within the parliament structure,
that
would take
would be
sign off from the
a
Min
very high up
family.
decision to make.
Yeah. Before we dive deeper into the character that you'll be playing in this campaign and the way that they kind of fit into this general structure, was there anything else from an audience perspective that you think they should know about your country prior to the campaign starting?
I would definitely say that even though the term nation and kingdom are kind of thrown around in regards to Hỗn hợp, it is not a truly unified area. The whole principle behind a confederation is it is literally a group of individual kingdoms saying, yes, we will work together, but we still have autonomy. And so when you enter what is known as the Confederation territory, you may not like feel like you are in a single nation because you're going to have someone who is vastly different and vastly out of touch or different from what you heard about the actual government. And so when you're going to go through the nation, it's like you're going to see how loose the Confederation is actually held together.
Could you give me some examples just of the cultural differences between some of the members of the Confederation?
A lot of the jungle kingdoms, they are familial kingdoms. The family's been there for generations. It's usually more matriarchal in nature, and you'll have these like outside terms like duchesses, queens, that kind of stuff. But in terms of culture, like actual specifics of the area, they're very lackadaisical. They do their job, they do what they need to do in order to survive, but at the end of the day, they love just relaxing, love enjoying life. They're in their own little world. They're in charge of their fate. Nothing, anyone outside can really affect them. And so that kind of breeds a culture of being able to enjoy life rather than having to worry about what something might happen. Compare that to Beyond the Jungle, really, especially at Konoha. They are more driven for like exterior motives and gain. And so you have a lot of just hardworking people, like up by their own bootstraps, that kind of thing. And it's a much more serious mindset out there. You'd be able to see that kind of in like the mannerisms, like in the jungle. So long as you're not a threat or disrespectful to them, people will be accepting of you. Like, yeah, welcome to our little village. Come in, we'll give you dinner, that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, in the city, it's kind of like, fuck you, I'm doing my own thing.
I should ask, what is the species makeup of Hỗn hợp? How does that differ between the jungle and the northern area?
So jungle is very much the home of Fae and elves. They kind of intermingle there, but again, because of the isolated nature of the jungle, they don't interact as often as you might think, being in close proximity. And so you may have a Fae kingdom over here, high elves over here, that kind of stuff. And they're all in like close proximity on a map, but you would never expect them to interact with each other. Compare that to more of the open area of Kaihawk and Kona. A lot more people coming in and out of those areas. You'll have elves, fays, humans, even some creatures out there. And then the hills, the open pasture, and everything is kind of just a lot of nomadic tribes, be them fae, human, or whatever. And out there, it's really no real settlements, just you get the wandering tribe here and there.
What species is the Min family?
Min family are elves.
Any specific type of elf?
Primarily high elves, although in recent generations, because of the focal point, it started to mix, which some in the Min family are for, others are against.
So then, Parker, this might be the last time I'll call you that for the entire podcast. Please introduce me to your character and a little bit about their role in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, so I will be playing a half-elf called Francis Thawne. He is the son of a merchant from Konoha and a duchess of the Min family. So he is related to both sides of the political spectrum of the Hỗn hợp. The way he grew up was kind of torn between which side of the family he would lean on the most. Because even though he's related to the royal family, he was never anywhere close to the line of succession. He was exposed to both the royal courts of the Min family, but also the hustle and bustle of the merchant life. Both his parents were trying to pull him in either direction. His mom wanted him to go into the courts. His dad wanted him to find a trade that he can be a part of. And Francis chose neither and decided to go to Kaihawk and join a religious order there.
For the lands that make us, for our divine system, we are utilizing kind of broad archetypes that have specific historical stories that have kind of been lost to time and interpreted differently between each country. However, these archetypes are powerful and real and serve as sources of divinity because clerics can devote to practicing kind of that lifestyle and get power from them. As a reminder, the archetypes for our campaign will be the Emperor, the Matriarch, the Warden, the Hero, the Healer, the Merchant, the Eloquent, the Knight Stalker, the Lover, the Friend, the Lost, and the Watcher. Again, these are kind of broad concepts that are still going to be interpreted through actual play or through kind of further defining by our players. Did any of these appeal as kind of a source of power for folks within this country? I imagine in a wider sense, folks across all four of these countries in one way or another kind of do worship these figures or draw power or inspiration from the stories that are told around them, kind of like any legend or mythic being. That being said, of course, societies and individuals can focus more on one lifestyle or the other to kind of draw power, faith, and inspiration.
He would definitely feel like he's more drawn to the lost, simply because of his upbringing and not knowing where he wants to go. He found his calling in the kind of connection between him and the idea of the lost, and he wants to make sure that people who also don't know where they are, where they want to go, give them that guidance to help them down a road that they might find success in.
I love that. So does that mean Francis is a cleric?
He is.
He's a cleric of the lost. I love that. Perfect. And we'll kind of further explore what that means through real play and kind of define a little bit better about the attributes related to each of the archetypes that make up our pantheon. But that's great. I love the lost being the kind of guiding force behind Francis's ideology as a cleric. From that perspective, I just have to ask, how close in the line of succession is Francis to being the head of Hỗn hợp?
From being related to the actual leader, but he's not like unknown to them.
What is Francis's day-to-day like? Does he still live in the capital city?
Yeah, he's still in the capital city. He mainly lives. He doesn't have his own place. He mainly lives bouncing between kind of shelters, both as like practical means of like just living there, but also as a way of like being closer to those that he be helping. And so his day to day will be waking up, going out to the streets, and making sure that like people who come here, will thinking that they're gonna have like opportunity and find that they're stuck there without anything, kind of like giving them direction, where to go, where to find work, how to get on their feet, that kind of stuff. And if they need a little monetary boost, he will help them or at least guide them in a direction to get help.
That's great. So with that, we are going to be beginning this campaign at the center of all four of our countries in this valley of lost architecture, with these structures that were created by a society that had been lost to time, unknown in their true creation. But there is still the regular meeting of representatives of all four nations in one of the central structures called the Peacemeet that occurs once every 50 years. It is an opportunity to create new trade agreements, peace agreements, import, export agreements. It is also a place for movers and shakers to kind of move up in the world. It's very common for this event to be seen as an opportunity to become something from nothing, just because there's so many powerful people kind of gathered in one place that strike up the right conversation with someone, and you could have it made. So this is not the easiest place to get to. I'm assuming, based on the structure of your country, you'd have to go through almost the entirety of the jungle to get there from the capital. So it's a long journey. It's not super easy, but there is a lot of potential there. That's to be sure. So with that, what is Francis's main drivers for attending the Peacemeet, and who else from Hỗn hợp do you think would attend something like this?
The nation has been around for a while, but it still hasn't made much progress. So there's a lot of pressure to extend beyond just the borders to say, hey, we need to establish ourselves on the kind of known world scale. But obviously, like, rumors would spread like the Confederation is not held together, it's very loose, it is disorganized, and it's not worth anyone's time, really. And so, in addition to representatives from the capital and from the port city, Francis would kind of be petitioned to go as a symbol of, despite the differences of the past, we are moving ahead. Look, here is the son of both sides of the nation. He would kind of be the symbol almost of how the Confederation is progressing and how it's developing. And it's like, it's not just this backward agglomeration of kingdoms. It's actually an entity that can step onto the world stage and make something of itself.
So who else from the country would be attending?
I would say probably the governor of Kaihawk, the capital, as well as the governor of the port city. Both represent both sides of the nation, and they would go not only to represent the Confederation as a whole, but also their individual cities. Kind of going against the reason why France is it, but it still shows that like there's autonomy within the nation.
Yeah, and I think it would send a bad message to exclude them as well, right? Since they represent such a large body. Any other members of the Min family going, or is Francis kind of the representative from that perspective?
So the governor of the capital is part of the Min family, and so they would be related. But Francis himself would not be a representative of the royal family. He would kind of just be a representative as the Confederation as a whole.
Kind of the symbolic figurehead. That's great to kind of, yeah, I love that. All right. Francis is somebody who is on a daily basis helping those who need him. Does his aspirations at present grow beyond that, or is he content with his current lifestyle?
He at this point is content with how he's been living his life, although he's seen the stagnant nature of no matter how much he does, it's still like people are still coming into the capital, still need help. And so he definitely wants to try and find a way to like, instead of just helping people when they need help, helping people stop need help.
Are there any societal structures that he currently is thinks needs to be changed that are at play?
At present, no. Although he has seen from his time in court the impracticality of the present government and the fact of there being two tiers of very separate governance, both the local and the royal, and how there's a disconnect between them. Because a local governance may enact something and then it means nothing to someone else. Or the royal family enacts something and the local government says, no, we're not following that.
So, one more hypothetical for you. Let's say that Francis is charged within his position as kind of connected to the royal family with a dignitary being present within the country. And he has, like, let's say 2 weeks charged to show off as much of the country as possible and kind of show that culture. What are one or two things that Francis makes sure this dignitary got to see in full, in person?
Definitely the capital, as it very much represents the coming together of the various regions and cultures. But he would also try and stay away from the jungle and move more towards the port city, because in the jungle itself, there's not really a sense of unification or national identity. And so he wouldn't be showing off the nation, he'd be showing off that local kingdom. And so he'd want to go to an actual place where there is something that can be proud of to show, and kind of like, even though it's against the royal family, it puts the Confederation in a good light.
I love that. I love his kind of focus on presenting a unified front. Any kind of natural occurring structures or wonders that would be shown as kind of a point of pride outside of like the people and work put into the country?
Yeah, so one of the natural like occurrences and wonders is the Bay of Kuna. That is like a bunch of these like very skinny but like densely vegetated, almost like individual mountains that are scattered about the harbor. And even though like there's a very safe passage into the harbor, it's kind of like the scenic winding route through the bay before you actually get to the city itself. And that's kind of the appeal of like trading with the city, because not only is it good commerce, it's a beautiful port to just visit.
So Francis has seen quite a bit of Hona. He'd make a good guide. That's great. That's a cool starting point. We'll see where we end up. Francis, Cleric of the Lost. Francis Thon? Thon?
Thon, yeah.
Thon. Francis Thon. Perfect. Well, I love this. This country itself is a gift as a GM. A lot of inner working structures that can, be relevant in the immediate, which is always very fun. Anything else about Francis that you'd want to share?
He was my first D&D character, and so kind of like almost putting a cap on this cycle right now is like started with him, and now kind of like this major project is going to end with him.
I love that. Yeah, I met Francis before in a different life, and I'm excited to meet him in this iteration. Perfect. I'm so excited for our first session. We're going to be starting at the Peacemeet, kind of go through everyone's individual journey to get there, just describe the setting a little bit, and then kind of get into the thick of things. A letter from Francis Thon to his cousin Maria, the eldest princess of the Min family.
Dear Maria, I hope this letter finds you well. The journey to the Peacemeet has been interesting, to say the least. The trek up the river and through the jungle has proven more challenging even for the most experienced guide that we could find. This task that has been put upon me is a great honor and privilege, but how it fell upon me is something I will have to ask you later. For now, I will honor the family's legacy and put our Confederation's best face on. I only hope the governors share our desire in making us more appealable to the outside world. For now, I will write as best as I can and as frequent as I can. Take care, and I hope Mother is doing well. Your favorite cousin, Francis.